Hi everybody, welcome to another Chats with Chaudhry. I hope you're safe and well. Today I'm continuing my Reflections and Forecast 21-22 series, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Julia Edwards, who is the President for CASSS or CASS, and also VP for Biologics Development, Pharma Technical Regulatory at Genentech. So Julia, it's lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Rizwan?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And where are you calling in from today, or this morning? I think because you're in California, aren't you?
Yeah, yes, it is morning here in California. I'm in San Francisco, calling in from home today.
Fantastic. And I knew you were calling in from San Francisco, which is why I put a Giants jersey behind me just for you.
Oh, that's very good. As long as it's not a Dodgers jersey, I think we'll be on fine.
I have got that as well, but I didn't do it because I know you're a Giants fan. So anyway, so look, before we start talking about 2021 and looking back at what happened last year and how it impacted CASS, would you mind giving viewers a very quick overview of CASS itself, for those not familiar with the organization, and a little bit about your own background as well?
Yeah, a little bit about CASS. CASS is, we're not-for-profit professional scientific society, and we bring together academic, industry, and regulatory professionals in the biopharmaceutical industry. And what we do is, we really put on symposia that bring together this technical community to solve what are some of the greatest challenges in biopharmaceutical development, specific to chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. CASS, we are a global organization. We have membership in like 30 nations, and I believe almost every continent. Not Antarctica, I will say. And we're really best known for having the tough conversations in these symposia. It's not just sitting there and listening to presentations. It's about solving problems and really getting to the core of what we do in biopharmaceutical development.
Brilliant. And a little bit of your own background.
My background, so I work at Genentech and I oversee a team that does biologics, chemistry, manufacturing, and controls regulatory. So we negotiate the terms of the licenses with global regulators that allow biopharmaceutical drugs, life-saving products to come on the market. So it's a fun and interesting place to work, that's for sure.
Brilliant. Right. So let's look back at 2021. And my first question for you is really, how would you describe 2021 in one word and why?
Yeah. So I would use the word dynamic. And a lot of emotions come up when I think about 2021. And I tend to like dynamic. And I like it because it's neutral. There were a lot of challenges and difficult circumstances. Those were both impacted people in the industry, both personally and professionally.
Sure.
But I do feel like there was a lot of overall positive things and positive growth that came out of it. And, dynamic for me conveys the twists and turns and everything we had to do to navigate that. And yet it speaks to the fact that it was a constant state of flux and churn and change.
Yeah, well, I won't disagree with you on that. And you mentioned the pandemic, obviously, and how has the pandemic impacted CASS in the last 12 months, or certainly in 2021, particularly given, obviously, it was the year 2 of the pandemic, and obviously a lot of companies had already done the rapid change within the first year. They pivoted, as everyone wanted to say. So how was year 2 of the pandemic for CASS?
Yeah, so what we really did at CASS, and we put on symposia, and they're global symposia, and in the past it had been coming together face-to-face to have these difficult conversations that we needed to have to solve these challenges. And with the pandemic and in 2021, we did pivot to hybrid meeting formats, and we substantially grew our membership on the virtual element here. So it's really interesting. We were bringing in a whole group of people that we hadn't reached before. So this is the opportunity of the virtual world that we really saw. And it was interesting because CASS were really known for these smaller collegial gatherings where you can have these really open and transparent dialogues, right, between industry and regulators. And we really saw this reshaped in the virtual world. And So it's really interesting. And at the same time, what we were seeing with vaccine development is the face of biopharmaceutical development and the pace at which we had to move to address the challenges of the pandemic sort of collided together into this hybrid meeting format, the virtual, and then what our membership and everyone who works in this profession was going through. So it was a really interesting year from that point of view.
And what about achievements then? So what things stand out that CASSS have done in the last 12 months or so?
So, I use the word dynamic. So despite how dynamic this was, we stayed true to having the depth of conversations, even despite this broader reach, that we really are known for. And specifically, we pivoted a whole meeting to become a special symposia just around pandemic-related issues, because we had membership who were on the front lines of vaccine development. We had regulators as part of our community who were on the front line of vaccine development. And there were a lot of specific challenges that were coming out. So supply chain, the use of digital technologies, advanced manufacturing, how we do things faster, and how we collaborate to really meet what is this global need. We brought forward into this special edition of what is our well-characterized biologics meeting. And we took it a step further. We usually don't do this. We actually published a paper specifically around this. And I was looking back at it, and it's amazing to read when you think about how far we came over 2020 to get to that point of this meeting in 2021, and then how much further we've even come in the past year. So I would say that was a great achievement of CASSS as an organization to make that pivot and to bring that conversation together.
Brilliant. Well, if that paper is publicly available, we might share that with this post then, and people can see.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That'd be cool. Now, looking back at the year from an industry perspective, I mean, are there any sort of trends and stories which stood out for you, both from a CASSS perspective and from a personal perspective, actually looking at it from your own background?
Yeah, I think, the pandemic for me highlighted heroes and who those heroes are. My mother is a nurse, and she worked through this entire pandemic. She put on her mask, she went to work, and she did what had to be done to save lives. I saw heroics, at work too, right? Like people, my team, we had pandemic drugs. A lot of CASSS membership was working on pandemic-related drugs and urgent issues. And I saw people do things and work and put their whole body, soul, spirit, everything into everything they did. And the capacity of people, of CASSS, of the biopharmaceutical industry to do this, it was amazing to witness. But I think it came at a cost, right? And actually, what was interesting, and if we post that paper, for the first time, in these CASSS conversations and in talking about this, we really started talking about the consequences of those heroics to the human capital of the people doing it.
Sure.
How sustainable, really, and this is the central question, how sustainable was that level of disruption? Because the obvious question to me is, if we could do this for the pandemic, man, we should be able to do it for everything, every oncology drug, because there's always a patient at the end who needs something.
Sure.
But at what cost? And how do we navigate the tension between those heroics and the cost to our own human capital and burnout, which I think became really real for us.
Well, that's an interesting point, actually. And I suppose that's what the general public would look at it as lay people and go, well, actually, as you just said, if you can turn around drugs so quickly for the pandemic, why can't you do it for all drugs? But obviously, we know this, like you said, it was a lot of human capital involved and also investment involved in a very short space of time, which would normally have been driven towards normal drugs in the way the pandemic drove it.
And I think yes, and I do believe we as an industry, we owe it to the public to move as fast as possible. And I do think this is regulators, industry, all of us are super committed to that. But if you have people who aren't able to ensure quality, safety, and efficacy of those products and to do that work well, there's a cost on the other end of that that I think needs to be considered. And it does create some tension in terms of how we can move and what we can do.
Sure. Do you think though also, I mean, and also it's the nature of the beast that obviously with drugs you do have to be very careful before you sort of issue them or release them, is that the industry has by nature been very, very conservative to such a degree that it had become conservative by habit rather than necessity sometimes. Not in every case, I should say, but you know, that just the nature is like, actually, we've always done it this way. We have to be conservative. And although technology has changed and things have changed to maybe speed things up, it's been very hard to change the mindset until the pandemic when people were forced to change their mindset.
Yeah, and that's really an interesting point, right? And I've thought a lot about this is how much of this was complacency and how much, you know, were we stuck in our process and our routine and our own story. And actually before the pandemic, we had been planning WCBP, well characterized, our kind of our signature symposia for the year. And the theme had been pioneering disruptive change, because as I was coming into that, it's like, we have to shake ourselves up, right? We really have to shake ourselves and kind of get out of this, you know, story of what maybe is a little bit of conservatism, a little bit of entrenchment. And what happened is the pandemic, right? And we had to pivot this meeting to more of this special session. And like, so what happened is we had this theme of disruptive change that was going to show up in our symposia. And then we actually had to real time pioneer disruptive change, unlike anything I've seen before. And I think it did shake us up. And I'm very hopeful of where that shakeup is going to bring us in the future.
Brilliant. Now, one thing I've asked some people in this interview, some would like to answer it, some don't, is that are there any areas that you think the industry could have done better and how? I don't necessarily mean CASS, but maybe just the pharma sector in general. I mean, do you think it could have done better in certain areas and how it could improve in certain areas?
Yeah, and this is a really good question, because, you know, when I talk to somebody like my mother, who is a nurse, who's like, why weren't there vaccines faster? Like, why didn't we get that faster? And I know the people who were moving as fast as they possibly could. And so I really can't say we could have gone faster. I think the intention and everything there moved us well along. What I think I'm seeing, and I'm a bit critical of all of us over the past several months, is like, we knew we were going to have to come out of this pandemic, right? We knew this, and yet we didn't plan for what that meant, because transitioning now to the new normal is actually really difficult. And I'm not sure we were very well prepared for what that's going to look like. You know, whether that's, you know, hybrid meeting formats, for example, to be more specific, they take a lot more time to produce and they're a lot more complex.
Yeah, sure.
But yet now we have to do hybrid meetings because we reached our membership and it met our mission and vision, and it was actually a really positive thing. So I do think we could have been more planful about what all of this was going to mean in 6 months to a year when we were coming out of it. Because I think the exit from the pandemic, the transition from pandemic to endemic is also complex.
I think it is. And I think, you know, I know the numbers in the States are rising at the moment again. And I know Philadelphia, for example, just put the mask mandate back in again when they didn't have it.
Oh,
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah, they did only yesterday or today. So it's changing on a regular basis. So it's very, very difficult to say when we're actually officially out of it or not, isn't it? So looking ahead, and that segues very nicely actually to the next one. She was looking ahead to 2022 or the rest of this year. So from your perspective, again, from an industry point of view, what do you see as some of the big trends that we can look forward to in 2022 in terms of the industry in general, you know, and what people should expect to see going forward?
Yeah. There's two big things I'm sort of expecting. One is in this area of innovation and technology, specifically cell and gene therapies. There's this wave of new technologies, new modalities, new ways of treating disease that's hitting us, right? These products have very diverse mechanisms of action, and they need, they're kind of where biopharmaceuticals, classic monoclonal antibodies were 20 years ago. And those are coming, that wave, it's hitting a lot of us, and they're very early in development, but I think it's going to come and hit us more directly. I think specifically in the space of regulatory science, where, these things are, cell and gene therapy is relatively new. What are the regulatory structures? How do we deal with these things as they become approved? And how do we manage they have complex supply chains and very interesting things that need to be considered in this area of chemistry, manufacturing, controls. So I think, we're going to see that as more of a trend. And as we go through the year, I think, and this is where CASSS does play a role, we have a cell and gene therapy meeting. I think it's coming up here in June, actually, that is going to hit on some of these issues. And I think the other piece, in addition to that, is just the continued globalization, right? So the ability to supply countries globally remains central to the biopharma sector. Essential to the CASSS community, essential to patients, right? It's a global call to action that we all have every day. So I think we'll see an increasing focus on globalization and the ability of even global health authorities to use reliance pathways, to rely on approvals from other countries instead of, the timelines that some of these things can take is too long. And this is what I do think the pandemic and that disruption highlighted, right, is the urgency of that global supply. And it's incredibly complex when you get into, you could have 150 some regulatory authorities trying to approve the same drug at the same time.
That's really interesting you should say that, because obviously, as you said, from a regulatory perspective, globalization is really important to make it a bit easier to have drugs available. But at the same time, I know, having spoken to others, that supply chain has been such an issue because it was globalized, that onshoring has become more in vogue than previously, where people are looking to manufacture the drugs themselves, though, with their own factories in their own countries. So there seems to be slightly contradiction, if you like, between they want to manufacture at home more because obviously secure the supply chain, but at the same time, to make it more readily available globally, then you have to sort of globalize the regulatory structure.
Yeah, and I think localization of supply chain structures is actually really interesting, right? And what that means and what it means from the regulatory approvals. And it can be a pathway to that approval in that country. And then how, pharmaceutical companies like Roche Genentech then manage that in what is a very complex supply chain with big stainless steel facilities all over, right?
Yeah,
what
sure.
does that really mean? It's fascinating.
That is really interesting. I hadn't thought about the globalization of the regulatory, so that's really interesting. Now, looking ahead for CASSS, and you mentioned obviously the June event, and I know you had an event this month already. So what can we expect to see from CASSS in 2022 for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so cell and gene therapy, I mentioned that, and it really does hit on this wave of new modalities that is coming. And I think I do want to, I think the emerging technologies, the regulatory frameworks that are needed, how we manage the supply chain, even details like potency assays for these things, they're all going to be a part of this cell and gene therapy meeting. And I think these discussions are critical, and I think they're going to grow in terms of interest and in terms of like where that discussion and really that, that really unique value statement of CASSS is bringing the industry and the regulators together to talk about this stuff in a very real way. So I'm really looking forward to that meeting, and not just for this year, but also like where we can grow. You know, if cell and gene therapy is where biopharmaceuticals were 20 years ago, this is really where we're going to grow, where the next real fascinating part of regulatory science is going to come. So that's coming up in June. The other thing I wanted to mention, because it talks about globalization, and I mentioned earlier, CASSS, we are a global organization, and we have meetings in North America, Europe, Japan, South America. And I'm really happy to say we are now have a presence in China as well for our chemistry, manufacturing, and controls strategy forum. So we had last year, we actually piloted in collaboration with the China Center for Food and Drug International Exchange. We had a live stream pilot of a strategy forum in China, and it was hugely attended, even in person in China. And then it was the live stream event, and it was really cool to see, you know, the need for globalization, the need for access around the world sort of play out in the CASSS organization of that meeting. And it was very successful, and we're actually going to be having it again this year. I don't think we have a specific date posted on the website, and we're working through that. But I'm really excited to see something in that continued globalization of this particular meeting series is really exciting to see in this next year.
Brilliant. We'll look forward to it. Well, we'll put the links to all the CASSS events anyway above the video, so people can click on the website and see all the upcoming events, so you don't miss anything. So finally, final word. You know, what last thoughts would you like to leave people for the rest of this year, as Easter's coming up now as well? So what's your Easter message then, rather than
right, Easter message? Well, I'm going on vacation to Mexico, so I would say a few margaritas and a beach. But I think you know, we're, and from a biopharmaceutical perspective and a CASSS perspective, we're really working on our new normal. And, you know, maybe the themes of Easter, being reborn, kind of coming back into the spring, the hope, the amazing things that we've learned over the past 2 years, and the amazing heroics and what we saw in people. It's a very hopeful message, right? Like, I really think what we learned over the past couple of years, it will forever change how we approach drug development. And we shook ourselves up, and we shook that complacency out of our system, I think. And we're headed to some great things for patients in need and for society in general. So I'm really hopeful about that.
Brilliant. It was a lovely way to finish. So Julia, thank you very much for your time today. It was lovely to see you, and I hope you have a lovely holiday in Mexico by the beach with your margaritas. There you go, viewers. If you'd like to know more about CASSS itself and the events, then you can click on the link which will be above the video and find out more about the organization, find out all about their upcoming events. They have got an events calendar on there as well, with links to the individual events and their different symposia. And also, you can, if you've got any questions for Julia based on what she said today, then feel free to put them in the comments below the video, or you can message Julia on LinkedIn as well. So all that's left me to say is, Julia, it's lovely to see you. Have a fantastic rest of the year. Have a fantastic holiday. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you very much, Rozwan.
And thank you, viewers. Until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.